Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States.
We have been given a gift by God today to usher in a new dynasty.
Now you get RFK Jr.
Don't you want a president who's going to make America healthy again?
You get Tulsi Gabbard.
Putting our country in a continual state of war.
You get Elon Musk and you get J.D. Vance.
A hell of a way to start the next 4 years.
The right-wing Avengers.
We have an army of digital soldiers.
Department of Defense under Donald Trump will achieve peace through strength.
Shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one.
The rescission of 78 Biden-era executive actions, executive orders, presidential memoranda, and others.
The golden age of America has most definitely begun.
Begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay.
They're getting the dirtbags off these streets.
There's one guy who can fix this shit, and it's Donald Trump.
What's storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
Do you want the truth? The kind they try to hide. It's not left versus right. It's a war for our minds. We built this land with sweat and grace, but they sold our birthright to a stranger's face. We just wanna work to live, to be free, to raise our kids and keep our dignity. But every law they write, every rule they spin, takes another inch from the people again. It's us versus them, the people versus control. The flag still stands for freedom, not for gold. They can try to divide, but they can't break the sun, 'cause this land belongs to everyone. And we'll stand as one. My friends on the other side, I feel your pain. You've been lied to too. It's the same old game. The system's broken, that much is true. But I don't hate you, brother, I stand with you. We've all been played by the hands of the few. They print our chains in red, white, and blue, but freedom ain't theirs. It's in our soul. It's the will of the people that makes us whole. It's us versus them, the strong versus the fake, the workers, the soldiers, the hearts that won't break. We'll stand by our faith, our flag, our gun, 'cause this land belongs to everyone. And we'll stand as one. Freedom's not a gift you're handed from a throne. It's the fire in your chest that says I stand alone. It's the farmer, the builder, the mother's cry. It's the spirit that refuses to die. They call it progress, we call it theft of the blood and sweat that our fathers left. But when the people rise, the lies are done, and we remember we're the one. It's us versus them, but love wins the fight. Truth is our weapon, and God is our light. They can chain the body, but they can't chain the sun, 'cause this land belongs to everyone. And we'll stand as one. So raise that flag, let the stars still wave, for the land of the free and the home of the brave. We'll bow to no tyrant, we'll kneel to no crown. This is our hope, we won't back
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're in the world. My name is Josh, and welcome to the Red Pill Project's Daily Dose, live with you Monday through Friday. And I hope everybody had a great weekend out there and was paying attention to what's happening in the world, man, because, jeez, the storm's coming. And for everybody out there wanting these hats, it's actually a law enforcement training group out here in Minnesota. I don't think they're for sale. I got this from somebody. So, but you can always try because I've gotten a lot of messages of people wanting the hat. I got hoodies and hats and stuff like this. Tonight we got an action-packed show for you. I got Tammy coming on for a few minutes, just waiting for her to join in. And then right after that, we're going to have I hate that word, Colonel. It's pronounced different than it's written. But Colonel Towner-Watkins is going to be joining us talking about Operation Gladio and how it really never ended. And what we are witnessing today is more of a new construction of Operation Gladio. And if you're familiar with her on Alpha's channel or on X or any of the other podcasts that she's been on, this is going to be one heck of a conversation talking about the history of various different intelligence operations and how this resistance has been growing over time to where it is today. So let me go make sure that we are good and rocking and rolling. Yeah, we are rocking and rolling on all channels. And, I will start out right now with a meme that's actually going around. And it's a timestamp meme. It's kind of funny, but I don't take these things as funny, but it's kind of funny. So the White House posted this, right? And a lot of people missed the context of it because it was in reply to GameStop, a statement from GameStop declaring that the console wars are over, okay? And so they say, whereas the past 2 decades, the global gaming community has engaged in ongoing and increasingly petty conflict known as the console wars, whereas said conflict originated in the 2000s, the release of Halo Combat evolved as a Xbox exclusive title, whereas Halo Campaign evolved, officially coming to PlayStation 2026 with cross-platform play. Therefore, GameStop, acting under its authority and a neutral entity in the world retail gaming industry, declares the official cessation of the console wars. So the White House goes ahead and posts, obviously, Chief, and by the way, 117 is the Chief's number, but Chief as Donald Trump standing in front of the flag. Well, they posted this at a timestamp, and that's what you got to pay attention to. And the timestamp was 10:40 p.m. It's comical because we're talking about GameStop doing a press release. And so the timestamp goes, would you believe they called the White House for comment prior to publishing? That's kind of funny, people. So I find that really interesting, kind of funny. Do I think that there's significance in 117? No, I don't. I don't think it's 11-7. I think that the White House is, number one, showing us that the boards and comms are active and that we are active participants in it. But I don't think that it's relevant to what's going on right now. That's just my thoughts. I mean, contextual reference frame, right, people? We always got to have a level of contextual reference frame. Now, if we go to the boards, though, and we look at 11.7, we don't have 11. We have 11.3. We have 11.4. We don't have 11.7. Remember that. In the sense of 11.117, post 117. Let me see here. Not really relevant whatsoever to any of it. I look at it in the context of something else that the White House actually, not the White House, DHS actually posted a little while later. And this was Halo. And so they posted an image of Chief finishing the mission. And I'll pull this up. And, you got to, and this is also them, to me, signifying cross-correlation of communication. So this is Homeland Security saying finishing the fight, destroy the flood, join ice.gov, and then you have Chief sitting there in front of the Halo. Now, if you don't know the story of Halo, it probably don't understand this, but we cannot allow Halo to fall into enemy hands or they will destroy humanity. That's the whole variation of it. FYI, Halo is America. And so this goes back to infiltration instead of invasion. So interesting little comms there. You got to love it. They like to play with this, but the idea that they're playing with these comms and you have cross correlation to the boards, you always got to look for contextual reference frame. So whenever we're looking at legitimate comms, we're looking for contextual reference frame. We had a few of those this weekend, and we'll get into them. First thing I want to do, though, is I want to bring in Tammy. She's got some exciting stuff to talk to us about here. So we're going to get Tammy in. What's up, Tammy?
Hello. Gosh, I just raced in because I had to gather up the tribe of cats that I have right now, Josh.
Oh,
I have to.
How many cats do you have?
Dude, it's crazy. I don't know how this happened to me. I was never a cat person, but when I moved to a farm, you actually have to have cats. Otherwise, yeah. Otherwise, you have a rodent problem. So I was never, ever a cat person, but it just kind of evolved naturally. Mm-hmm. And now I have too many cats, but I am getting rid of some. So I have 3 little kittens.
With a 22?
No. No. I have my son is 22, and he's got some girls that he knows that are just love kittens, and
they must be lefties.
No, not necessarily, but they're let's just say, like, you know how girls flock to puppies. It's also true of kittens. So my son is enjoying getting rid of these kittens.
They have no idea what they're getting into.
Anyway, so putting cats away, though, is, herding cats. It's a true statement. It's difficult. It's very difficult, but we got it done tonight. So anyway, thanks so much for having me here. I'm excited to share with you today a little bit about Naturally Inspired, because we are having we don't really talk about this when I come on Thursday.
I was going to say, like, for everybody, like, Tammy comes on all the time, but she never talks about Naturally Inspired and what she does. And so I'm like, come on.
Yeah, because we are hitting a point in Naturally Inspired where it's super exciting, Josh, because we're getting people results now. We've been at this a long time, but anything good takes time to build and to see the fruits of your labor. But it's really happening now. And so I'm so excited, and I don't want anybody else to miss out on the change in the medical model. I covered today on Naturally Inspired Radio, this was so interesting, that triage nurses, they used to have triage nurses that you would call and say, hey, I've got this going on, I've got that going on. And these nurses have, 10, 20 years or more in nursing, so they're highly experienced. And they tell you, go to the ER, take this, do this, this is your next thing, right? They are now training AI. So, so what's happening is they are actually being shadowed by AI, and they're to let AI answers the questions and then correct it when it's wrong. And their corporation told them, because they said, well, we're training our replacement. And their corporation said, no, this is just a tool. But of course, we know exactly where this is going, right? We know exactly where this is going. So anyway.
So put your health back in your own hands.
Yeah. So what I've noticed through my health text line, Josh, is that people are afraid of the medical model now. Rightfully so. I mean, I covered again today. There was another nurse who came forward to say, listen, you're not getting informed consent anymore. It's a fact. With the new Affordable Care Act, when you get admitted into the hospital, you sign a contract, essentially. And that contract, just so in the fine print, as you go in, it says any biologics that they need to give you while you're getting surgery or treatment, you don't need to give further consent for that, as long as it's a biologic. Well, you know what a biologic is, right?
It's anything they want it to be.
That's right. So they no longer have to give informed consent for that. So, so rightfully so. People are afraid of going to the doctor. And I'm here to tell you that it's high time that we actually change the medical model anyway. But the medical model is not going to be changed by these corporations. It's not going to be changed by the health insurance companies.
Hold on. You missed a song I just played. So,
oh, really?
So it's called Us First Them. But the idea behind it is that, look, Washington, I don't care who's in power, is not going to change the world. They're not going to change the system. It's up to you and me to change the system.
Exactly. So this is what I'm hearing. About $48,000 a month now to cover a family of 5 for health insurance, Josh. So that means it is like premiums per month. Okay, premiums per month plus a $6,000 deductible per person. So you have to pay premiums, and then you have to pay another $30,000 on top of that for your deductible per person. Yes. So some families are shouldering up to $48,000 a year just to get coverage. Okay. So yes. So, I mean, the writing's on the wall. Like it is not more broken. It can't be any more broken. Right. So what we've been kind of ahead of the curve here with Naturally Inspired, but there's consequences to being ahead of the curve. And one of the consequences of being ahead of the curve is that people didn't really understand what we're doing. So we've been really trying to just stay diligent and keep it going because we're changing the face of care. We are changing the model. And as AI gets phased in and you get less and less contact with humans and doctors and more contact with artificial intelligence, community is going to pick up the slack. Health communities. And that's what we started 6 years ago with Naturally Inspired. And so what we offer is that support that you've been looking for. So just by becoming a customer of Naturally Inspired, you get access to our community. So the people that have access to our community right now, Josh, it's blowing me away. People are losing weight, which I'll talk about losing weight because it's not all about losing weight, but obviously turning, your metabolic health around is very important. And a side effect of turning your metabolic health around is losing weight. So people are losing 25 pounds, 15 pounds, 10 pounds, it's because they started to understand how their metabolism works and how to feed it. The other thing they're understanding is inflammation. Inflammation leads to dis-ease in the body. It is the root cause of disease in the body. So how do you combat disease? Well, number one is nutrition, right? So you take out the processed foods, you eat with high protein, healthy fats, you hydrate properly, but also you need polyphenols in your diet. That helps.
Chocolate.
Yeah, that's one of them for sure. But I'm talking about resveratrol. I'm talking about pomegranate skins, really dense polyphenols. Even people like Peter Diamandis on Moonshot and people like, that are in tech and even Brian Johnson, who is the guy that's trying to cure death, right? I think he's transfused his child's own blood into his to try to capture deeper health and longevity. He's come forward and said, listen, polyphenols is the way as well. So this is a huge component. So inflammation is part of it. But, products are tools. They are tools, right? Nutrition is number one. Lifestyle is key. And where we find that people struggle is how do I build a lifestyle? So that's where the Naturally Inspired community comes in. So we are changing the face of medicine just by creating this community and giving people the support that they need. So here's what you get from the Naturally Inspired community. You get access to my health text line, which many people on here know, 720-303-8868. It isn't a chat bot. It isn't AI. It isn't any kind of bot that responds it's actually me. It's a human. You get weekly wellness workshops every Tuesday night. So last Tuesday, we talked about insulin resistance. which is a huge part of metabolic health. You get that every Tuesday night. You get community. So there's people in the chat. We talk often a half an hour, 40 minutes after our presentation. And so you build these relationships with people that are on the same journey as you. And they're getting results, which inspires you. It's contagious. When you get around a community of people that are all like-minded and trying to do something for their health together, it's contagious. So you also get 15% off of all of my product line and whatnot. And as long as you're an active customer, you get me. You get me and the community ongoing for as long as you want to be a part of the community. So some people, they are there every Tuesday night and they don't miss it because they are in a point in their health journey. They got to get serious.
Yeah.
You know?
Is this Zoom or?
Yeah, it's on Zoom. Every Tuesday night, we're on Zoom. And then we also have a back office that you can register once you become a customer, so you can access all of our recorded calls in our library. And in that back office, there's articles that I've written, there's recipes, there's all kinds of resources on there as well. So you get all of that just for being a part of the community. So what I wanted to invite your audience to try today is a very special red pill. It's literally a red pill, and it is my cellular reset, and it is densely packed with polyphenols that attack inflammation at a cellular level. It's been proven to restore mitochondrial function, and I feel like it's the beginning of your health journey, is to really tackle that inflammation. And you can go to Red Pill Cell Reset because Jason set up a whole page just for your audience. It's called redpillcellreset.com, redpillcellreset.com. And when your audience alone, just your audience, so this is an exclusive offer just to your audience, goes there, I'm going to give them a special gift on their second order. So if they order tonight, next month's order, I will be giving everybody a free product. So yeah, so you will get a free product put in your digital cart. And when you go to checkout on your next order, it will be there for you at zero cost. But that's only for Red Pill people. So they have to go to redpillcellreset.com. Have to go there. And I invite everybody to join us in this community. Naturally Inspired was started 6 years ago.
About the same time I met you.
Yeah. It was not too long after that we met you. It was started because I saw the need out there, Josh. It made me so frustrated and sad to see people who were just acquiescing to pharmaceuticals because they thought there was nothing else. They thought that was the only thing that they could do. And that was a lie, and I knew it because I had been through my own journey with my son being injured by a medical intervention, by my mom passing away from cancer. The medical model didn't help anybody that I loved. Right. And so I knew there was a better way. And it was out of necessity that I did all the research and became a holistic nutritionist and a health researcher, where I'm always on a quest to find a better solution for health. The body knows how to heal. Only the body knows how to heal. We have to give it the raw materials, though, to heal, which starts with nutrition. And our cellular reset, the redpillcellreset.com, go there, get yourself a real red pill. It attacks inflammation. It's full of polyphenols. Even the tech guys are using polyphenols at this point. And we should be too. Let's tackle the inflammation to restore the body back into homeostasis. So that is the entryway into joining the Naturally Inspired community.
Awesome. And everybody out there, if you want to go ahead and check that out right there, redpillcellreset.com. It is on the page. I also put it into the chats. It's in the description, so you can go check that out, redpillcellreset.com. Go on over there, help support Tammy. Take a look at what she's got to offer you over there. And Tammy, I'm going to see you Thursday night.
I know. I can't wait. I already have some stuff I got to talk to you about.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm excited. I can't wait. We'll see you Thursday night. And hope you have a great night.
Thank you. Thanks, Red Pillars. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Josh.
Take care, Tammy. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, the moment you've been waiting for. Colonel Towner-Watkins is going to come in here and join us, retired United States Air Force colonel, exposing Operation Gladio and the International Syndicate, what I call the International Global Cabal or International Global Organization. Colonel Towner, how are we doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know, it's been... People have been like, you need to do a show with Colonel Towner. You need to do a show with Colonel Towner. And I'm like, don't worry, we will. We'll get there. We'll get there. But it's about time we finally got connected.
Yes, I agree.
Well, how you doing tonight?
I'm awesome.
Well, so I got the topic is Operation Gladio. Now,
yes.
As much as I think I probably don't know much about this topic, I probably do know a lot about this topic, don't I?
Probably.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about it and tell the audience, number one, a little bit about yourself, your background, and then how you got into Operation Gladio.
Well, that's quite a story. So as you said, I spent 30 years on active duty. I started off enlisted working on aircraft as an aircraft mechanic for 8 years. 6 years was in the Air Force and 2 years was for a civilian airline, which ironically I found out in my Operation Gladio research was a CIA contractor called Evergreen Airlines, which was a big it was a shock to confirm it, but I had my suspicions when I was there, only because I actually worked at UPS's overnight hub, and Evergreen Airlines had the maintenance contract on all of the UPS aircraft. And the first time I walked up the steps to do the pilot debrief with the guy that was mentoring me, because I was a brand new A&P mechanic, I noticed on the flight deck, there's a door going into the cockpit, and it had all of these plastic envelopes, like, document protectors, and it had all of these strange countries' clearance paperwork in these document protectors. They were all South America. And I was like, well, that's weird. So when we got back in the truck after we did the pilot debrief, I asked the guy, what was that all about? And he goes, well, those are clearances for the aircraft to land at airports. So just curiosity, every time I would go on the airplanes after that, I would look at all the different countries that they were cleared to go in, Costa Rica, Colombia. I'm like, oh, that's totally weird. Now, again, at the time, I don't know anything about this. I don't know that that's all the places we were bringing in heroin or taking drugs, because I worked there from, ironically enough, 1985 to 1987 when I graduated from Indiana University. So I would go to work at night. I'd go to school during the day. And that was in the middle of Iran-Contra.
Right.
That's when we were flying down there all the time, dropping off weapons and bringing drugs back. And so the whole time I've been researching Operation Gladio and the drug trafficking and all of this other stuff that's part and parcel of it. I'm actually reliving parts of my life. And so just for the audience who may be new to Operation Gladio, I'll give you just a really short overview of how I found it. So I have been an avid reader my whole life. I have a library of several hundred books, and all of which I had read. And about 3 years ago, I had picked up a trilogy, 3 books by Anthony Sutton, just because of some things that I had read online about his take on the world. Really was that in, Reader's Digest version, there was, in the late 1800s, there was a thing called the Fabian Society that was basically fascist, Marxist type thought of, and they literally said that their goal was to create one world government. And they their method of doing that was to create chaos. And out of chaos, they could control everybody. So Anthony Sutton's book posits that this group of oligarchs, the Rockefellers and all of those types of people, Ford, had basically funded the Bolshevik Revolution out of New York City and the city of London. And that created communism. And they also are the same oligarchs that funded Hitler's power, creating the far right. So we've got the far left and we've got the far right. And those types of polarization allows people to be controlled out of fear. You know, you in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up, you know, communism was a big boogeyman. And God forbid you ever get called Hitler. So you have the polarization. And by doing that, you can psychologically control everybody out of fear. And so during World War II, there was so I finished the trilogy and my mind's blown. I go on to read Joseph Farrell's book, The Third Way, which says basically that you create a left and you create a right. It's the Hegelian dialect. Mm-hmm. And you push everybody into the middle so that you can control them. And when I read that at the end of the book, it talked about this thing called stay behinds. Now, just for the audience, not as in a bragging way, I have 6 different degrees. I've taken a lot of history classes. I graduated from Air War College with a master's degree in strategic studies. I have an MBA. So I kind of understand the financial piece of this, and I understand the strategy piece of how economic, political, and military power is applied to countries to control them. So that's kind of my background and the way my brain processes things. So again, 30 years experience in military operations. I had never heard of this term called the stay behind units. And the way it was written, you could tell it was meant to be militarily applied. And I'm like, well, that's weird. How could I have not ever heard about that? And so I started doing some research on stay behind units, and I heard the term Operation Gladio. And Operation Gladio was the element of stay behind units after World War II that was set up in Italy. Now, I spent 3 years in Italy. And again, I'm like, how did this happen? And I didn't know anything about it. Well, Italy also called it the years of lead and the strategy of tension. Now, those terms I had heard about because Operation Gladio got revealed on the 2nd of August, 1990. That just so happens to be the very day I got to Italy. And so there's this big uproar. And it also happens to be the day that Iraq invaded Kuwait. So there was a lot going on that day. And I walked into the Rome airport for the first time on my first overseas assignment. So again, this research project became personal to me because I had lived through so much of this tangentially and didn't even realize what I was in the middle of. So World War II is happening. There's a secret meeting towards the end of World War II in northern Italy. Allen Dulles and a major general by the name of Lyman Lemonsker attends this meeting. Lyman Lemonsker was General Eisenhower's chief logistics officer in Europe. Why would a logistics officer be at a meeting with Allen Dulles in northern Italy while the war's going on? They met General Wolf, who was a Nazi. He was in charge of the werewolf units, which is the code name for stay behind units for Hitler. So Hitler had put stay behind units all over Nazi occupied territory. Hungary, Romania, Ukraine, all of these places, France, Austria. And what they were designed to do was if Germany lost territory, these stay behind units had hidden caches of weapons. And these caches of weapons were to be used by what appeared to be civilian populations, but they were highly trained in explosives, guns, communication, and they had stashes of money in these caches, stay-behind units. And so Lyman Leminsker and Allen Dulles made an agreement with General Wolfe that they were going to buy the freedom of all of the key Nazis in the stay-behind apparatus, to include Reinhard Gehlen, that goes on to be West Germany's chief of intel, Allen Dulles' counterpart while he was at the CIA. They installed a whole bunch of Nazis in NATO. For the first 16 years, almost all of the civilian side of NATO was manned by Nazis. A lot of people don't know that because they were denazified.
You're right. They were turncoats on Nazi. They plotted to kill Hitler, of course, right?
Yeah. So this meeting happens, and Allen Dulles now has the blueprint. So they get Reinhard Gehlen right after the war. They fly him into Washington, D.C., and he's there dressed up as a 4-star U.S. Army general, getting debriefed on how this whole system was set up. They then take his blueprint, which is already all over every German-occupied territory, and they expand it throughout all of what will soon to be NATO. Mm-hmm. So all of the NATO countries, plus most of what ends up being Eastern Europe, now under the Soviet Union, Albania, Hungary, all of those countries, Romania, they have stay-behind units in them. And the plan was that they were going to cede that territory to the Soviet Union, but they were going to activate those stay-behind units and basically overthrow the Soviet Union's occupation. That's not how it worked out, as we all know, because as the CIA and NATO begins activating those units and dropping additional people in, the Soviet Union had already figured it all out and killed them all, like literally killed them all. And that kind of has modern day implications because there were stay-behind units trained by Otto Skorzeny, who was Reinhard Gehlen's chief trainer for the stay-behinds in Ukraine. That's where Banderites came from. That's where the
Bandera
came from. That's where Right Sector came from. Right Sector are the guys that orchestrated the Maidan coup. They were the actual trigger pullers. And so this has modern day implications. And so I started doing research on where all were these stay-behinds. And it took me about a year researching what they were called. Like, for example, in Portugal, they were called Agenter Press. In Turkey, they were called Grey Wolves. There was a different name in each of the different. But the reason why it's generically called Operation Gladio is because Italy was the only one that ever did an investigation and revealed the fact that they had them and that they had done domestic terror events. And so these units were set up under the guise of anti-communism. Mm-hmm. But after World War II, communism wasn't a threat to anybody because there was, depending on what number you use, 25 to 50 million Soviet soldiers dead and civilians. They were rebuilding their country. They were not interested in furthering expansion at the time because they had no mechanism to do that. So why did all of these stay-behind units to fight communism get set up? Well, they got set up to do domestic terror. And that's all they were ever used for. The Brambart killings in Belgium that happened where they were just mowing down people at supermarkets. And they loved targeting women and children because psychologically, murdering women and children give you more bang for the buck. Think school shootings. And so you see this mechanism being developed throughout NATO countries that target domestic, they commit domestic terror. And they do that in a lead up to presidential election or a bill that they want to pass, like 9/11 and the Patriot Act. And so you start looking at this and you're overwhelmed by the implications. And they killed Aldo Moro. They killed Olof Palme, the Swedish prime minister. They killed the Italian prime minister. So and I'll walk you through the JFK. There were French stay-behind OAS agents in Dallas that day. So the implication of having these trained assassins that you can deploy all over the world, and they are equipped with all kinds of state-of-the-art weaponry in these stay-behind caches that are usually buried in forested areas that are exclusively governed by like state parks or federal parks or land that people don't normally go to visit. That's where like 20 years ago, there was some development going on in the Netherlands, and they discovered an entire field of them. These old chests with weapons and C4 explosives and radio equipment. And there was a 4-year investigation done in the Netherlands because they had swore up and down they didn't even participate in this, only to find out that they did. And so so about a year into my research, I was sitting out in my library area and I was like, wait a minute, we're in NATO. There was a secret agreement assigned. In order to enter NATO, you had to have stay-behind units.
Interesting.
I'm like, we were in NATO. Where's our stay-behind units? So I started researching. We spent probably 6 months just looking at terror events in the United States, like 9/11, like the Oklahoma bombing, like Waco. And you would be amazed at the correlation. All of our original terror events, the big ones, like the car bombing in downtown DC that killed the Chilean ambassador, was Gladio. And so we started honing in on what is commonly referred to as Cuban exiles. And so the entire Cuban exile population that was cultivated by the CIA down in Miami, you have, thousands of people that were trained at places like Lake Okeechobee and different abandoned World War II airstrips down in South Florida. And originally they were supposedly trained for the Bay of Pig invasion. But what do you do with all these trained killers when they're just hanging around? Well, they were used for all kinds of stuff because they were used to overthrow Nixon. They were actually arrested and convicted Cuban exiles in the Watergate break-in. We know that they were involved in the JFK assassination as a decoy. So you start looking into several of these Cuban exiles, and one name stands out really, really well. And his name is Felix Rodriguez. And I started finding him in all of the coups in South America. And so there was a sister program set up for all of Latin America called Operation Condor. It's very much like Operation Gladio, but it was specifically for Latin America, where we overthrew the government of Brazil, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, and we installed military dictators. Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. We tried Nicaragua for a long time. We originally installed a military dictator there, Somoza, and he was there for a long time. He was very corrupt. And the Nicaraguan, the Sandinistas, overthrew his government, and then they're still on the shit list. Even though the Sandinistas were eventually voted out of office, Nicaragua has stuck with this because the Sandinistas are still there. And that was what Iran-Contra was all about. We were trying to overthrow the government of Nicaragua and get rid of the Sandinistas because we were always told they were communist. There goes the anti-communist thing, right? So for a long time since Truman, there was a National Security Action Memorandum signed that basically says if you can prove by the CIA's fake intelligence that somebody's a communist, you can kill them. You can overthrow their government, whatever you want to do. And when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So if the only hammer you have has communist written on it, then anytime you want to use your hammer, the nail has to be a communist.
This is interesting too, because I mean, if you go back to the historical context, 1940s and 50s in the United States, I mean, you got the outward expression of we got to stop communism, we got to stop it, North Korea, South Korea, China, everything that's going on in Asia. We got Latin America, South America that starts in the 60s and the 70s, Vietnam. But internally, you have people like Senator Joseph McCarthy that's saying, hey, they're here in our own government. And he was immediately shut up. He was immediately put in his place and eventually most likely killed because of that. I mean, that even goes back to the I was just talking about the other night, the banking plot. The banking plot with Smedley Butler, General Smedley Butler. They came to him to run the bonus army to overthrow FDR. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Goes in and meets with FDR. And FDR, he said in his book, it's like, it was almost like FDR was expecting me that day. And he just played it off like it was nothing. In Congress, they tried to mark me as crazy. But it was the context is that this was happening internally to the United States, that there were very, very strong factions trying to implement some type of authoritarian, totalitarian control within the United States for a very long time. And they found their methodology through the Central Intelligence Agency or through the OSS originally in the CIA. And they found their new boogeyman being communism as this methodology to do it.
And when communism went away, the new boogeyman was going to be radical Islamists. And how do you develop that? Well, in the 1980s, knowing the Soviet Union is going away, they institute a false flag in Afghanistan, bait the Soviet Union into Afghanistan, and gives birth to the Mujahideen, which gives birth to ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all trained by the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we've got our new boogeyman, and the National Security Action Memorandum was just pen and ink, communist or radical Islamist terrorist.
Right. Well, and that was actually redone post 9/11 under the 2001 AUMF, authorized use of military force, to where basically anything that correlates directly to association with September 11th, any terrorist organization that you want, you can just do it through executive order. Now you have your new boogeyman. And this is just the money train that keeps the military industrial complex flowing.
So let's talk about that for a second. What I came to realize is that the same people that Anthony Sutton talked about funding the Bolshevik Revolution and Hitler are what I refer to as the International Syndicate. It's a group of oligarchs that control the world. And that group of oligarchs, prior to World War II, had to fund their own intelligence capability and their own paramilitary. Kind of like going back to piracy, and you get a letter of marque, and all at once you're a pirate, but now you're official because you got your letter of marque and you can go steal everything. That's what we're talking about. So why would you want to overthrow a country? Because they have resources. And one of the very first coups that was done after this new organization was set up was Iran. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So you have this international syndicate who wants to control the world's resources and create one world government. Well, the best way to do that is to install a bunch of controlled military dictators all over the world, or controlled assets. So this syndicate who has to pay for the intelligence in order to do that in countries prior to World War II, because we did it a lot prior to World War II. I mean, we stole Panama from Colombia. We stole Hawaii. We overthrew the Queen. So we've been doing this for a long time. It didn't just start happening after World War II. But they had to pay for the intelligence, and they had to pay for the paramilitary people to go in and conduct the overthrow. So what they decided to do after World War II is forever since have a standing military and a standing intelligence agency and offload the cost of that onto the American taxpayer. So now through JSOC and all of the other stuff, we have our standing paramilitary people and we have our standing intelligence, and those oligarchs no longer have to pay for it. We do.
Mm-hmm.
There's no difference in the pre-World War II overthrowing of a government than the post-World War II, except for we're paying for it. And so if you go to Iran in the overthrow of Mossadegh in 1953-ish, it was all about oil. So the
British Petroleum,
what is now BP, had the concession for extracting the oil. And at the time, they got 84 cents of every dollar, 86 cents of every dollar. And the Iranians, the citizens, got 14 cents of the revenue. And the U.S., Standard Oil had just worked out a 50-50 split with Aramco and Saudi Arabia. So Mossadegh, the new prime minister, because the Shah's gone, he said, I want 50-50. And the British said, you can't have 50-50. And he said, okay, then you're out. We'll just nationalize the oil. And the British said, you can't do that. And he said, I just did that. So they passed in their Congress the authorization for Mossadegh to nationalize the oil. Well, the British tried to overthrow him. They tried to kill him, and they botched the entire thing. So they just pick up the phone and they call Standard Oil and say, hey, we'll cut you in on this deal. You need to get the CIA to come over here and overthrow him. So Standard Oil's old attorney, Alan Dulles, is the CIA director. And so he goes, hey, Kermit Roosevelt, grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, I got a job for you to do. We need you to go overthrow this government. And so he goes over there. And in the lead up to that, do you know what I found in Iran? Stay behind units. Stay behind units. The CIA had went into southern Iran and co-opted a bunch of disgruntled tribal chiefs to create stay-behinds. They were there. They actually even had a military advisory group, a MAG down there. And they used them as basically the foot soldiers, which USAID now does, but they used them as foot soldiers in the overthrow of Mossadegh. And so that starts a model. And that model became kind of the standard operating procedure that in Indonesia, when Sukarno came to power there, got elected, democratically elected, we're all about democracies. Well, they didn't like him because they couldn't buy him. And he started having meetings of non-aligned. He wanted to be neutral. He wasn't a big Soviet Union person. He wasn't a big West person. He just wanted to be unaligned. Well, that's not allowed. You're either with us or you're against us, as they like to say. And so the CIA tried to overthrow his government. Sukarno's military shot down an aircraft, and the guy they shot down had CIA documents all over him and created a big brouhaha. And so after they got rid of JFK, Johnson went back into Indonesia and overthrew the government and installed Suharto. And that's where Barack Obama's mom was at the time of this coup. And the guy that she married, he was a colonel in the military that helped overthrow the government. Ta-da!
Ta-da! I love it. It's really interesting listening to kind of the modern variation of it, because in the beginning you were talking about kind of the Fabian society. And if you go pre-Fabian society, You start getting into Albert Pike and Mazzino and the letter that they talked about with the 3 world wars. And what we're talking about here is the dark occult. We're talking about secret societies. And if you go to the 1850s communist revolution or socialist overthrow of the monarchies in Europe, this is what it was all about. You go back to the French Revolution at the end of the 1700s. We had an infiltration within various secret societies and institutions, and then through them, they utilized psychological warfare techniques on the people to basically turn people against their monarchies or against their governments to try to implement their own forms of government. And this was done primarily through what I would call the Sabbatean Frankists at the time. This would be the Adam Weishaupts and the Rothschilds, and they perfected it through after Napoleon, the Napoleonic Wars funded by the Rothschilds into the 1850s throughout Europe, and then the centering on the Vatican in the 1860s. Basically bankrupting the Vatican, then coming in as the primary financiers of the Vatican. This would have been the Sassoon family and the Rothschilds, and through the black nobility, the Colanas and the Orsinis, merging together to actually take over the Vatican's land deeds and the Holy See, which then in 1872 funded what? The Treasury of the United States of America after the Organic Act. And then this is where you get this infiltration after the Civil War of the United States of America. Money's flowing in, but our institutions start to get compromised. And this leads up, obviously, to 1913 and everything that occurs in that point in time. There's a whole story of Teddy Roosevelt and McKinley getting killed and how this all plays into it. But there was some good people in the United States that actually tried to stop this from happening, this infiltration. But you know, after I think it was like 1913 is a defining turning point where a lot of this comes about. Because after this, we go into World War I. And World War I, for people out there, was ended by the Treaty of Versailles. And the Treaty of Versailles, if people go out there and study this, it was a boot to the neck of Germany. And interesting enough that Andrew Dulles and his brother were some of the co-authors of the Treaty of Versailles.
Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles was 2 key players at the Treaty of Versailles.
That's right. Now, interesting enough, the Treaty of Versailles is one of the main reasons what led into World War II, because Germany couldn't sustain the sanctions or the reparations that were put onto them. So they branched off, they built up their military, they went to war, but we know that this was financed by both sides. This was financed by the King of the Netherlands. This was financed by the British royalty. This was financed by American aristocracy, both sides. And then what happens is you get the Nuremberg trials. Well, who was one of the chief justices that proceeded over the Nuremberg trials? Alan Dulles. Again.
Well, he wasn't actually one of the chief justices. He was involved only from the selection of who met the,
Correct.
Yeah.
And this is where you get the Banderites staying in Ukraine, funded by the CIA, because they were on trial originally for war crimes for what they did in Poland, with over, I think, 400,000 Jews that were killed in concentration camps.
Not just Jews.
Well, not just Jews. And very important fact there.
Yeah.
But
and in Ukraine, they killed their own countrymen.
That's right. But it was Andrew Dulles who basically got a lot of these people off of the hook and preserved them for Operation Paperclip, and as well as stay behind units, which formed the Banderite units within Ukraine as an anti-communist unit against the Soviets, to basically produce the Cold War that we saw.
So Alpha Warrior and I went through a lot of the mechanisms that they use, like the World Anti-Communist League, and the where they gathered up all of the old Nazis and all of the fascists in Japan and Korea, and basically created this entity called the World Anti-Communist League. And the World Anti-Communist League was basically like a NATO for the stay-behind units. It was a governing apparatus that was used for training and stuff like that. But you mentioned the Vatican, so I have to tell the story of how they fund all. So all of this is done covertly. Mm-hmm. Now, when the stay-behinds were originally set up, they used the Marshall Plan. There was a covert element of the Marshall Plan used to fund the initial fielding of the supplies that Lyman Lemonsker went around procuring. They were using excess military equipment that was left in the theater to set up these stay-behind caches of weapons. But the Marshall Plan had a fixed end date, so they needed to come up with a way to fund these things. It couldn't be done on such a scale out of an appropriated funding stream. So they needed some way to find the money. So a guy by the name of Colonel Paul Helliwell is over in the Asian theater during World War II. And he's helping a guy by the name of Chiang Kai-shek, because during World War II, there was 2 wars going on in China. One to expel the Japanese, and a civil war between Mao and Chiang Kai-shek and some other warlords. And you mentioned the Sassoons. Well, if you go back a little bit in history, you have the Tatas, the Sassoons, all of these people that were bringing Indian opium under the guise of the British Empire, because India was a British colony at the time. They were force feeding this opium into China. And Chiang Kai-shek was one of the big warlords that was using the opium, selling it throughout China to fund his war against Mao. And so Mao didn't want to have anything to do with drugs. And so he was vehemently opposed to drugs, period, opium, anything. And so there's fierce fighting during World War II between the 2 elements internal to China. Well, Chiang Kai-shek eventually gets expelled out of China. He then moves into Burma. And you go back to the airlift with the Flying Tigers and Claire Chennault, another military officer. Paul Helliwell calls up Alan Dulles and says, hey, you know those stay-behind things you want to set up? I got a great idea of how to fund them. Let's sell opium. We can sell opium covertly, black markets, all cash. We can use that for covert operations. Alan Dulles is like, that's cool. Let's do that. So they move Chiang Kai-shek into Burma, and he's there for a little bit, but the Burmese government gets sick of it because there's fighting breaking out. There's all kinds of violence and stuff like that. And so the Burmese government says, yeah, we're not doing this. And so there's a little island off the coast of China called Formosa. And Paul Helliwell says, hey, I need some help over here. We need to move Chiang Kai-shek to this little island over here. And then we're going to start calling this little island, instead of Formosa, we're going to call it Taiwan. So the Republic of China gets set up on the island of Taiwan by the drug lord Chiang Kai-shek. They set him up on the island, get rid of their government, and basically tell all the Formosans, this is your new leader. Well, immediately the Formosans were like, are you kidding me? We just got out of World War II. We don't want another guy, especially a drug lord, running our country. And so they're all up in arms. There's declassified CIA documents and State Department documents into the United States. Basically, one of the ambassadors' cables is talking about the Chiang Kai-shek KMT army bayoneting people on the stoop of the embassy in what is now called Taiwan, because those people were fighting back against the U.S. installed new dictator there. So Chiang Kai-shek immediately declares martial law. He starts launching, there's 7 islands. It's not just Taiwan. There's 7 other islands in this string of islands along the coast of China. They immediately start attacking China from these islands, trying to get Chiang Kai-shek back in and overthrow Mao. None of it works out, obviously, but they don't stop trying. They continue trying for 30 years. And they're launching attacks constantly. And meanwhile, they are using Thailand as a pivot point for the drugs. And that's what got us into Vietnam. The whole idea of getting into Vietnam was, hey, if we take over Vietnam, we can use that to launch Chiang Kai-shek back into China. That's the whole purpose of the Korean War. That's the whole purpose of the Korean War. There were stay-behind units set up in North Korea. It is those stay-behind units that activated coming over into the U.S. controlled territory. So for those of you who don't know, after World War II, Korea had been a Japanese colony. So we get all the Japanese out. As you're well aware, when we take over territory, we basically put military people in charge of it as they transition to a democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Korea was divided into two sectors, a northern sector and a southern sector. The treaty said that within a year, they're going to have elections for a unified government. But the northern sector was put under the control of our allies, the Soviet Union. The southern sector was put under the control of the U.S. military. And what we were supposed to do is get all the Japanese out and then transition the entire peninsula into a unified country. But that's not what the Western people wanted. They wanted that entire island or the entire peninsula under the control of the Western oligarchs for lots of reasons. But the number one reason was this Chiang Kai-shek guy sitting over here. And we are going to insert him back into Korea and then launch back into China. Well, that didn't work out very well, because what happened is after they instigated the Korean War with their stay behind false flag, we know that the U.S. Gets all the way up and got a little too big for their britches and actually went over the Chinese line. That pissed the Chinese off. They come in and help the North Koreans. Mm-hmm. And here's just a little politics. In the South, the guys that the U.S. government tried to prop up down there were not there during the war. They were hanging out in Shanghai, which was an international city. They fled Korea. They didn't fight, nothing. So no one in the South liked any of them because they viewed them as imposters. And then you have Kim sitting up in the North. And the North at the time was the most industrialized part, not unlike our Civil War. The most industrial part of all of the Korean peninsula was in the North. These guys down here were all farmers. So all of the patriots, the nationalists in the South during the occupation of the U.S. Army was murdered. Entire villages were burnt down. Where any resistance to U.S. military authority existed, they eliminated it. So by the time you get to the false flag, you have no resistance to what's going to be the occupied government democracy that we're going to install in the South. And so as we fight up, lose ground, draw the DMZ, we're left with the South. The North is still there, and we have the forever DMZ. Basically, if you move over to Vietnam about a decade later, you have something very similar to that. Ho Chi Minh, during World War II, had his own OSS detachment. The OSS agents that were working with Ho Chi Minh wrote glowing reports about Ho Chi Minh, how he's a nationalist, he's not a communist, everybody loves him, he's a strong leader. But he even goes to Paris, where they're doing the end of World War II negotiations, with a draft of the Constitution that he wants to implement. That he had help in drafting it from his OSS agents. He wants it to be a democracy. He wants to have a unified election. Mm-hmm. So again, we go into the post-World War II setup. The northern sector of Vietnam was given to China, which is actually Chiang Kai-shek. And the southern sector, if I recall correctly, was given to the British. And so they're going to do the same thing that they did in Korea, basically. But Ho Chi Minh's not having it. He's like, no, you guys promised us an election. We're going to have an election. And they're like, yeah, no, we're not. So the CIA uses the Catholic Church and all of the Catholic priests in the North to conduct a psychological operation on people that had lived in the same villages for hundreds of years. And they tell all of those villagers that Ho Chi Minh is going to basically murder them all, cut all their babies out of their bellies if they're pregnant. They waged a psychological warfare to scare the hell out of all of these villagers. They mass migrated over 1 million Catholics from the north into the south to prop up their Catholic fictional new president that they're going to elect in the south part of Vietnam. And that goes back to the original drug story. So now we've got Chiang Kai-shek doing all the drugs. Well, what are you going to do with all the cash? Do you know who volunteered to money launder all the cash? The Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church becomes the #1 money launderer for all of the covert drug money that is being used to launder into weapons for and funding for regime changes and stay-behind unit activities around the world. There was so much money generated from this drug activity out of the Golden Triangle that they eventually have to set up several fake banks, one of which was the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI. It got set up in 1972. Around that same time, they set up a bank in Australia to do the Golden Triangle. BCCI was in Pakistan. Technically, it was ran out of London, but supposedly a Pakistan bank to do all of the Afghanistan opium. And then you had the BCC or Nugent Hand that was set up in Australia that was going to do all the Golden Triangle. And basically, they were fake banks to money launder. BCCI got so big so quickly, within a couple of years, it becomes the 7th largest bank in the entire world. Money laundering drug money.
And what did it migrate into?
Well, it gets outed as a fake bank in 1992 because some legitimate DEA guys doing an investigation down in Miami find out that one of their branches, BCCI actually bought 4 U.S. banks illegally under false pretenses. And there was an investigation that went on between Miami and Tampa, and the trial was actually in Tampa, and it was exposed as being basically a fake bank, and it got dissolved. Something very similar happened in Nugent Hand in Australia, except for the guy that was running that bank, Nugent, he was found dead, assassinated in his Mercedes. Yeah. His #2 guy was a Green Beret guy by the last name of Hand, and he was the weapons guy. So they were trafficking weapons and trafficking drugs. The last time I found Hand, he was living up in Idaho selling knives to the military.
Now, the story that you're telling of what was occurring in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, this is a very familiar story. I mean, we heard the same story, Libya, Syria, Iraq, I mean, in the 2000s. Right now, we have the U.S. Navy off the coast of Venezuela. I mean, Ukraine and Venezuela, I call them autonomous zones. And the reason I think that these were set up as autonomous zones is because number one is they don't have any large affiliation. So Ukraine isn't a member of the EU. It's not a member of the Soviet Union. It's kind of an autonomous zone in Eastern Europe. You can set up fake banks. You can do human trafficking, drug trafficking, arm trafficking directly through there. You can go in there. You can set up shop. You can do bioweapons development. You can do nuclear weapons development in Ukraine if you wanted to, and nobody's going to know the difference. The same thing is with Venezuela. On this side, it's another autonomous zone for military intelligence agencies, so forth, to run these operations.
So I don't think that's true with Venezuela. I definitely think that's true with Ukraine. We've been told such a pack of lies about Venezuela. It's not even
Let's get
funny.
into it.
Almost everything that you think you know about Venezuela is not true. As a matter of fact, one of the most common misnomers is the whole election thing and Smartmatic. Oh, it's a Venezuela thing. No, it's not. The 3 guys that created it were expats in Miami from Venezuela. There is a huge expat community from Venezuela after Chavez got elected, because all of the elites that had been corrupt and in bed with the Exxon and the oil and all of that other stuff, this happens in every case. When the country finally takes their country back, those elites that propped up the fake government has to go somewhere because everybody in the country hates them.
Mm-hmm.
They basically come to America and they form expat communities. Well, those three guys that set up the company Smartmatic and produced that election equipment was part of the expat community from Venezuela in Miami. Now, the fact that Venezuela ends up using that elections, most people don't know that they also require ID and a fingerprint to cast a vote. How do they have corrupt elections? We've been told that every one of their elections is corrupt. They have to have an ID and a fingerprint. Do we have elections like that?
Goodness no.
So who has corrupt elections? Is it Venezuela or is it us?
Well, I don't know. I still wouldn't trust an election in a third world country. That's just me. But
what do you call third world? Argentina was using Smartmatic machines. As soon as they got rid of them, they got Melee. Because they went back to paper.
Third world, I look at in a few different respects. So number one is societal construct. So I've been to Colombia, I've been to Peru, I've been to Ecuador, I've been to Panama, I've been all around those whole areas. And when you go to Panama, you recognize immediately that this is a third world country. And what I mean by that is the mass concentration of population, the societal norms, an AK-47 on the edge of every bike, every police station, every retail store, very, very high crime rates, very high murder rates within those areas.
And see, I've been to Venezuela and you don't see any of that there.
I've never been to Venezuela. I've been to surrounding Venezuela.
Yeah.
I didn't cross over the Bridge of America and I didn't go in there, but there's a lot of expats from Venezuela that actually migrate into Panama getting away. Because Panama, people don't know, Panama is America 2.0. It's very Americanized there, but it's still what I would consider to be a third world country. Even parts of Mexico, I would consider to be very, very third world country in the context of infrastructure and societal structure.
Absolutely.
Even parts of the United States you can go to in the South. They get pretty bad. But so when I say third world country, oh no, I'm serious about that. But,
there's more third world looking out west than there is in the South.
Well, Texas, but no, I love Texas. You guys are awesome. But anyways, I've been to them and it's a noticeable difference. Venezuela, though, I have not been there, so I cannot say for certain. Caracas, who knows? I don't know. But it's, Brazil has many attributes of a third world country, even though that it would be considered a first world country. You have mass centralization of population. You have rampant poverty, high murder rates. You have gangs and cartels that run rampant. It's not a place that I would necessarily want to go without a guide or somebody that I know to show me around. So that's kind of my context when I say third world country. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not going to fly into Afghanistan and be like, "What's up, people? How we doing?" Right? It's just I'm not going to last very long. I will get killed.
Well, you stand as an American a greater chance of getting killed in any country that we've overthrown and destabilized.
100%.
Because they really don't like us for that.
Well, and so, to your point on that, one of the main things that we're talking about here is this negative sentiment that has been created over the last 80 years in the world. Patrick Byrne did a great interview. He actually just reposted this today at the Great Awakening or the Reawakening Tour, where he talked about China and how he says China never forgets. And it was Western financiers that funded the opium in the China, that funded the regime changes in the China, that overthrew their country. China doesn't forget, and China is coming back for retribution. And what we are seeing right now with the Belt and Roads Initiative going all throughout Central and South America, with that whole platform being built out with the BRICS nations and Middle East, this is China bracing itself, getting itself ready for a war effort. Firstly, going out there and controlling natural resources, because at the end of the day, 50 years ago, money controlled the world. But really, it wasn't money. Money was just an intermediary for natural resources. Now
it's always been about natural resources.
It's always been about natural. Now it is specifically about natural resources.
But it always has.
Correct. Oh, no, I agree. But money was the intermediary that was utilized in communication for the exchange of natural resources. So people would say, "Oh, money controls the world." No, it's resources control the world, right? But if you look at what Trump's done over the last 10 months, this is a resource war, 100%. If you look at Venezuela, you look at Colombia, why is Trump there? Resources, people. It's all about resources. Number one, the eradication of the Belt and Roads Initiative that China had implemented into that region over the context of the last 5 to 6 years. I call it the Trump doctrine because it goes back to the Monroe Doctrine, where Monroe says, "I don't want any influence here in our hemisphere. Get them the hell out and use the Navy to do that." This is the Trump doctrine. He's doing exactly that to China right now. He did it in the Middle East. That's what he utilized upon Israel as the mechanism for Iran to go out there and neutralize them, creating backdoor communications between Qatar and Iran, basically annihilating China's chances of producing a trans railroad going from China all the way into Europe. I mean, he's a mastermind of what he's doing, and he understands the game. But the one thing is these people never forget, and a lot of terror has been brought onto their people over the countless 80 years. And this is, and I'll even say it, we despise radical Islam in this country, or Islam in this country. And a lot of what we see with radical Islam today is cultural. It is cultural. It is generational warfare that has been perpetuated by Western systems over the last 100 years.
Yeah, it's interesting that the basis, when you go back and you start looking, and I know Ghost talks about this a lot, of the Muslim Brotherhood set up by the UK, the Mujahideen set up by us. A lot of the elements at the fundamental level of the current elements of radical Islam has Western funding at its roots.
Yep. And that's not a coincidence for anybody out there. And I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood and their direct connections with the Muslim leagues. I mean, you have Saeed Abedin, who was one of the professor and financier of the original Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, who was his daughter? Huma Abedin, chief of staff to Hillary Clinton. What is that? She was nothing more than a handler. Her husband was Anthony Weiner, who had the insurance file on his laptop, which was all the dirt on Hillary Clinton. This is an intelligence organization. This is what Phil Haney, the DHSES that came out as a whistleblower in 2010 against the Obama administration, was trying to tell us, is that they are utilizing their excerpts, their stay-behind units, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood, whether it's the Antifa or these various communist groups, as infiltrators into our government. It goes back to what I call the Alice in Wonderland Operation Snow White. You go back to the 1970s, Operation Snow White, L. Ron Hubbard, and the Church of Scientology. And they infiltrated the United States government and other governments around the world with over, I think it was like, 30,000 people, and the largest infiltration of government ever, through utilizing their mass intelligence network. And if people want to think that it's just a Church of Scientology that's doing that, you're crazy. It's every large organization, every large religion, every large government, every large movement, so forth.
Have you ever heard of the Unification Church?
I have, but go ahead.
The Moonies? From South Korea? Reverend Moon?
Yeah, okay, yes.
That entire operation was a Gladio unit. He had his own weapons manufacturing. Do you know what newspaper he owned in the United States?
What's that?
Washington Times.
Of course.
He actually controlled the UP at one point as well. The whole Korea Gate for Bill Clinton, all part of it. The Reverend Moon, and it's very interesting, since we talked about Taiwan earlier. If you go and look at the current countries that recognize Taiwan as an independent country and not one China policy, almost all of them are in Latin America. And why is that? Because what I found out in countries like Colombia, which is obviously, depending on what math you use, between 80 and 98%. That's the highest percentage I found. Colombia supplies all of the cocaine into the United States. Okay, depending on, like I said, 80 to 98% is the range. So the Colombia, I did a lot of research into Colombia for that reason. You find a very interesting coalescing. Israel has had mentors in Colombia for a very long time, to the point where during Operation Condor, they actually built a Galil weapons manufacturing and munition manufacturing capability in Colombia. So they supply a lot of the weaponry there.
They supply a lot of the weaponry to every major conflict over the last 40 years, and it doesn't matter what side.
But very rarely do they actually build a factory.
True.
Unless they're going to be there for a long time. And Colombia is the big point in the Crystal Triangle. You had Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia. That's kind of where all the coca plants are developed. Colombia is like 99% of that pyramid, though. So you find Israel there, you find MI6 there, and you find the CIA throughout the entire country. But you also find Taiwan. Taiwan was in El Salvador during the Death Squad period. And what I found very interesting, going back to the Chiang Kai-shek days, they had set up an entity called the Political Warfare Cadre Academy. So if you look at the hierarchy of training narco-terrorist or paramilitary, there was basically a three-phase program. The Americas in Panama was phase one. And almost every military dictatorship that installed in Latin America all graduated from the School of Americas, which, by the way, still exists. It's on Fort Benning, and I visited it a few weeks ago. And just to kind of put a punctuation mark on that, as I was walking in the door, do you know who walked out?
Who's that?
A Colombian major. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a sign from God. Because I was going in there for specifically that reason. And when I left, I also found 4 Colombian National Police at the bottom of the stairs to the entrance. So we're still training Colombia to do really bad things like sell us drugs. So you have the School of Americas. That's step number 1. For anybody that's going to have a high level in a cartel, they will send you to the number 2 school, which was the Political Warfare Cadre Academy. One of the key things that they teach you at that Taiwanese school is that the first thing you have to do is when you form your cartel or whatever, you get your group together, you declare yourself a political party. That's why it's called political warfare. The death squads in El Salvador called themselves a political party because anytime anybody attacks them, they're attacking democracy. So I can literally be a death squad, which I'd say the Democrat Party is close to that. But as long as I call myself a political party, if you attack me, you're attacking democracy. That's part of their operation. The number 3 school was in Israel. It was a 1-year school. And if you were going to be one of the kingpins in Colombia, they took you to this school that was ran by the IDF in Israel for a year to train you on how to have a leadership role. And we just so happen to be talking about drug cartels.
So my military background, I don't know if you knew this. U.S. Navy, I was a fire controlman, so I worked on weapon defense systems. My first station was on board a U.S. Navy frigate. So you have to cross-train, everything like that. So I went to SSEW, FTFP, went to all these different schools, became a VBSS team member on my first 2.5 deployments, and we went to Southcom AOR. So everything that's happening right now, I'm like, oh my God, I was born for this, right? Because I've been there. I've done this. I've done the narco-terrorist interventions, and I know everything about those regions. So interesting enough is when I'm looking at what's happening right now, I'm sitting there going, I don't think people realize, why is the majority of the U.S. Navy in the Caribbean? And people are like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, 95% of all drug trafficking and human trafficking occurs in the Pacific. They don't deploy from Venezuela into the United States. The Caribbean is actually the last path that you want to take as a drug trafficker. You want to go out to the Pacific Ocean. You want to deploy from Peru or Ecuador or Colombia into the Pacific Ocean. You're going to hit the waypoints for LSVs along the way, and then you're going to meet midway to various different Nicaraguan or so forth drug cartels in there that are going to take possession of whether it's human beings or drugs, and then they're going to take it in. The reason is you got way more space to spread. And so, when Trump's like, oh, well, we've limited the amount of drugs coming into the United States drastically. Actually, you haven't. All they're doing is reverting this all the way over to Colombia through Colombia over to Peru and Ecuador. And they're just launching more over there because we don't have a massive naval presence over there. That begs the question then, why are we over there? And the question comes in, obviously that answer is, this isn't about drugs. Drugs is just the mechanism to use the 2001 AUMF to utilize the executive orders to produce the methodology that go in there and stop what I would call the progression of China, the Belt and Roads Initiative, to secure the resources in that region and keep them within the Northern Hemisphere. You're talking about the cartels and politics. So in 2000, this had to be 2005 or 2006. We boarded a Ecuadorian vessel. It was considered to be an LSV, a logistics support vessel, but most of the times they would have cocaine on board. And this was a commercial fisher line, which is very rare for them. But we had good intel. Apparently, we had a source.
Oh, that's not rare at all. As a matter of fact, the entire Iran-Contra was ran on shrimp boats.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Yeah, so we apparently had a source on board who's like, there's cocaine on board. So in order for us to go, and this is kind of legally funny, in order for the United States Navy to go and interdict a vessel in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, number one is we have to get permission from that country's consulate. Number two is we have to lower the U.S. Navy flag and raise the U.S. Coast Guard flag and put our ship under the Department of Homeland Security.
Is the only one that's allowed to do that.
Put our ship's jurisdiction under the Department of Homeland Security, and then the Coast Guard lead-at teams can actually go in there, board the vessel, and we act as backup security force that goes in with them. So that's what we did, but the consulate said, no, you cannot board that vessel. We boarded it anyway because we had good intel. Our sources were telling us. We went out there, we drilled holes all throughout their diesel tanks, making the ship basically unseaworthy. No longer could they sail on the ship. Well, we had to take their guys on board. They went back, checked like 3 different times, no drugs on board. Next thing we know is the United States Air Force is getting kicked out of Manta, Ecuador. There's a massive protest going on in Ecuador, and we were set up. We were set up by the Ecuadorian government because we were interdicting narcotics and human trafficking that was coming out of their country, and it was affecting their bottom line and their business. Like, this stuff extends far up that chain of command. And it's horrific what happens. I mean, we had 2 interdictions of human trafficking, and one of them was so for everybody out there, to give them a little background, is the local fishermen, commercial fishermen, will go out there and they'll recruit from the families in Ecuador and Peru and the very, very poor villages, and they'll offer them $250 to take their children to the United States of America. And what they say is, we're going to take them all the way up to the United States of America. We're going to hold their hand while they cross the border, and they give them all these contact information. What actually happens is they take them to the fishing dock. They put them onto a steel barge with no roof on it. They drive them out to about 250 miles to a waypoint over near the Galapagos Islands, because a 150-mile radius around the Galapagos is off limits to U.S. Navy ships due to international regulations. They drop them off there, and they're lucky if someone finds them. 7 out of every 10 of those barges with children on them, roughly about 20 to 50 children on them, are never found, because the waypoints, they begin to drift, they're not anchored, and you have to wait for another vessel to come out from Central America to pick them up and tow them in without being interdicted. And so we came across 2 of them when I was deployed out there, and it's a horrific sight. It's horrible. And, I want people to understand this is what's happening out there. This is how cruel and evil these people are that run these organizations. And here's the key: is it's being funded by your intelligence agencies. It's being sponsored and trained by your intelligence agencies.
It could not go on this long without their complicity.
That's right.
But I'll push back a little bit on the Caribbean, because in my research, Dominican Republic, Trinidad, and Jamaica are huge waypoints on the drugs coming into the Port of Houston and Miami. There is a lot of drugs trafficked through the Caribbean. And I thought it was hilarious when they just recently announced that this coming up week, we're going to be in Trinidad on military exercises.
Yeah.
Trinidad is one of the biggest. So a lot of those boats that are coming out of the area, that waterway beside Venezuela and Guyana, go to Trinidad. That's where they're dropping those drugs. And they put them on bigger ships and submarines to bring them into the Port of Houston, Miami, and New Orleans. There is a lot of drugs that come in that way.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. And it used to be, so this was 2004, 2008 timeframe when I was back there. Caribbean was typically marijuana, massive amounts of marijuana. Pacific was cocaine. Now it's fentanyl. So you do have that fentanyl aspect that since China's deployed in those areas with the BRI, you have fentanyl coming in from the Caribbean area. So I have 10, 15-year-old intelligence there for. So
during Iran-Contra, we just finished Gary Webb's book. During Iran-Contra, all of the drugs that were going into South Central LA, the cocaine, all came in from Texas and 2 airfields in Texas. They would fly it in.
Arkansas,
Port of Houston, and Miami. And they had a caravan of motorhomes that they would fill up with money from LA, take it to Miami. They had a money launderer down there that was an expat of Nicaragua, Somoza government, that was doing this in order to get money to the Contras to overthrow the Sandinista government. And they would traffic back motorhomes full of drugs back to LA out of Miami. It's crazy. The airfields in Texas, they talk about, they flew drugs into Homestead. They flew drugs into Carswell.
Little Rock.
The CIA, well, that too. Yeah, definitely.
Bill Clinton.
Bill, Mina, all of that. So there was a lot of drugs coming in from, and that's what I said the other day. I said, so we've got the land route shut down with the closure of the border. We're shutting down the sea route by taking out those boats because, and everybody needs to understand, in order to have the intelligence to find one of those boats in the middle of the water and take it out, you have to know that with modern day satellite technology, they've tracked that boat from beginning to end.
Yeah.
They know where it came from. They're watching them put the shit on it. They know. That's the kind of real-time intelligence that we have. And so, so we've taken out, we're at least interdicting the sea lanes. We've got the land lanes locked down at the border. And I said, so the next one is starting to take out the aircraft. And everybody just laughed because, I mean, there's literally planefuls of drugs that are flown into the United States on a regular basis.
Did you hear the news earlier today? Venezuela has captured a CIA-backed mercenary group accused of plotting false flag operations in the waters near Trinidad and Tobago.
Would I be surprised? No.
No either. But I just found it interesting. But it's a CIA-backed mercenary group accused of plotting false flag operations,
which is Gladio.
So
the guy, you're aware that during Trump's first administration, you had Elliot Abrams and John Bolton, who staged a coup using a handful of Green Beret guys and a bunch of expats
in Haiti.
Huh?
Was this in Haiti?
No, in Venezuela.
Oh, okay, in Venezuela.
It's GOUCHARD or something like that. Goodard. He lived down in Miami. He had a company that was training people to do school security, and he got approached by Elliot Abrams and some other nefarious people to go do a coup in Venezuela. And two of his guys got caught along with a whole bunch of others. But two Americans were arrested. I think it was like 2019 timeframe. He's on trial now. He's been indicted for trafficking arms, even though he was approached by the U.S. government to do it. So because it failed, they will throw the book at him. And that's not unusual either. For them to try to, they put him under a gag order, so he can't talk about any of it. And John Bolton was behind it.
Interesting. Now, what are your thoughts then of the current geopolitical global situation? Obviously, John Bolton's getting indicted. We're seeing Trump crack down on these fentanyl and cocaine rings, which in essence, kind of what you're saying, this is the black money budget for these deep intelligence apparatuses, which no longer actually operate at the CIA level. They're more NGO, institutional.
No, there's two kinds. No, they still operate in the CIA realm. So the CIA is still doing the covert part. In 1983, when they set up the National Endowment for Democracy, and in the 1960s, when they consolidated all of the aid under USAID, there was an AID before that, and they still did the same nefarious things. But in the 60s, JFK consolidated them and created USAID. And basically, the CIA just offshored all of their activity to do overtly the baby steps. They still do the no kidding assassination, take people out. USAID doesn't do that. USAID is like steps 1 and 2. They will go in and fund political parties to interfere in elections. They go in through the Albert Einstein Institute and other apparatuses like that, which also had a Green Beret colonel that was advising Gene Sharp at the Albert Einstein Institute. They're the ones that go in and train all of the student activists. So they do the boots on the ground, get out, the chaos agents. But the actual snipers and stuff like that, like if you go to the Maidan coup, you had all of the people out in the streets. You had all of the chaos. That's all funded by National Endowment for Democracy and USAID. That's the overtly buying up of radio time, media, all of that stuff. That's done by, it was done by USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy. The snipers, the right sector, those are stay-behinds trained by the CIA to actually pull off the coup. A lot of times you don't have to go to the sniper level. A lot of times the students out in the street, maybe setting a few fires and stuff like that, will be enough to run the government off. But if it doesn't, then you utilize them as the phase 1 and 2, and then you bring in your snipers, you create the chaos, and in some cases you assassinate the president like they tried in Slovakia.
So let me get this straight then, and for the audience here. So embedded within the CIA are covert factions that are not under the control of, let's just say, Ratcliffe over at the CIA.
I would say that CIA's never been under the control of the U.S. government from the day it was set up. It has always, that's the reason why they hire lawyers. That's the Wall Street lawyers, bankers, public relations people, all Yale graduates, Harvard graduates. They send them to Rhodes Scholars, the School of London Economics, London School of Economics. All of these people that work in the CIA throughout history have ties to Skull and Bones. They have ties to the Harvard. all of them, all of the, I mean, for God's sake, Teddy Roosevelt's grandson, Kermit Roosevelt, was running a coup in Iran. They're all tied into that apparatus. And there has been occasions when the puppet president will sign a finding to say, yeah, go ahead and overthrow that government. But they'll do it anyway. They don't, that's a formality for them. Right. They will find ways to operate. And the most important, so the CIA is made up of two people, the covert side and the analyst side. Mm-hmm. The analysts are just there. Now, are there some good people that don't know any of this is going on because they're not read in? Yes. But for the most part, the analysts produce the intelligence to justify the covert action. They're not actually going out and collecting intelligence. They produce intelligence. They selectively audit intelligence, because in every one of these cases, like in Brazil, the whole time in 63, when we were overthrowing the Brazilian government, they were saying that guy's a communist, that guy's a communist, that guy's a communist. While at the same time, some honest analysts in Brazil were sending now declassified cables back going, there's no communists here.
So it's like 51 former CIA and intelligence people signing a declaration that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian propaganda.
It had the hallmarks.
Right. I love it. So, and going back to what we were just kind of before the CIA. So if we're wanting to dismantle that whole covert action of the CIA.
No, the whole thing has to go.
I agree. But how do you begin to dismantle it? How do you begin to...
That's what Jimmy Carter did. Halloween massacre. He fired over 800 covert operators out of the CIA in one day. That's why they hated him. And that's why everybody thinks Jimmy Carter's the worst president we've ever had. That's how good propaganda is.
So how do you think Trump is handling this?
I don't know. I said the day he took office, he should have went to the CIA, turned the light off, closed the door, and put a for sale sign on it.
Oh, I agree.
We would be no worse off.
You got more competent intelligence agencies right now that can do the same exact thing, Well, the DNI just said that the entire time they were coming up with the Hamas-Israel peace plan, that everything that came out of the CIA said Hamas was not going to agree to it. They sabotaged it from the CIA. Well, from the Mossad. So that came out.
No. From the CIA, all of the intelligence given to the DNI said Hamas will not go along with this. This is a bad idea.
Right. And Tucker came out and said that his sources inside the White House told him that Ratcliffe was getting directions directly from the Mossad and feeding that to DNI Gabbard.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't they?
We do exchange intelligence with other intelligence agencies. Mm-hmm. If you are trying to negotiate a deal between Israel and Mossad and Hamas, you are not going to trust the intelligence you get from Mossad.
Oh, agreed, 100%.
So all of the other intelligence agencies from Qatar and Saudi and all of this other stuff is feeding information back as well into the CIA.
Correct.
But also into Trump directly, because Trump has relationships with them. And every one of those people were telling the Trump administration that Hamas is going to go along with this. The intelligence coming out of the CIA was saying it wasn't.
Correct.
But that's not just the DNI. That's not how the CIA works.
Oh, I agree.
So there is an entire plethora of analysts in there that provide intelligence, whether it's made up or not, is a different story. Now, any intelligence in an evaluation of intelligence, there is going to be I don't even know what the right word is. You would weigh intelligence less from one of the interested parties. as opposed to people that are around the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously Israel has a motivation to not have that peace agreement go through. So on the surface, that literally makes no sense. And John Radcliffe is not stupid. So any intelligence that he would be providing would be caveated with the fact that it came from Mossad. And that would immediately be ranked lower in a credibility ranking of intelligence than something that came from one of the other parties that is neutral talking to Mossad. If you're trying to figure out if Mossad's going to go along with the plan, Israel's the last place you're going to go.
100. Yeah, I agree. No, 100%.
So that's what I'll say about that.
Well, so this came out of various different conversations that Tucker was having when he said that Trump basically says that Bibi is fucking me, and all of these conversations, which then were later confirmed through other people inside the White House. And he said that Ratcliffe is feeding him nothing more than Mossad propaganda directly from the ear of from John Ratcliffe into Trump's ear. So that's where that comes from. That's not from me. That's from Tucker. But
again,
Trump is going to use a lot more to weigh his decisions.
John Radcliffe is getting intelligence from his analyst. He's not picking up the phone talking to Mossad.
No, we don't know that.
And, well, I'm telling you, there's a team of intelligence analysts that was working on this. And that may have been the input that they're getting from Israel. But they have multiple sources. It doesn't come from just one place. And so, yes, Israel is going to be telling them that Hamas isn't going to agree. But that's not the only source of intelligence. They have intelligence sources in Qatar. They have intelligence sources in Saudi. So there's going to be a plethora of intelligence that is gathered into an intelligence estimate. And it's going to have the sources coded on the intelligence estimate, where they came from and what their input was. And so it's kind of, to me, it's not even a talking point to say that Mossad would be telling him that. Of course, they're going to be telling him that. But that means nothing in the overall intelligent assessment, because there would be 10 or 15 sources of information, not just one country. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, no. I'm just repeating what Tucker was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just repeating what Tucker was saying.
I'm sure
in the context. And I think Tucker was really insinuating that John Ratcliffe was more of being told by the Mossad directly that this is what you're going to tell Trump in that type of context. Yeah. At least that's how I understood it when Tucker was saying it. Either way, when we start to understand is that, number one, is Trump is making some very interesting moves over the last 10 months. Obviously, these are resource-based. Obviously, these are meant to dismantle what I would consider to be China's supremacy over the last 4 years that the Biden administration allowed to occur. The Belt and Roads Initiative in the Middle East, in South and Latin America, obviously, that's what a lot of this presence right now towards Venezuela is happening towards. Now, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing? And do you agree with that? Or do you see something wider in the context that, you know, when you're talking, what I look at is that Trump is dismantling the financial integration of this covert CIA. At least that's how I'm getting it.
So I think that every country around the world has a deep state.
Agreed.
And I think that Trump is dismantling and freeing the current leaders of the countries of their deep state. I mean, we watched it in the first administration with what he did in Saudi Arabia. Completely dismantled the deep state, fired, arrested, 40-some princes, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, that happened in Qatar. And that's another thing that people miss with Qatar. Oh, it's the home of the Muslim Brotherhood. Oh, it's the home of the Hamas. Well, hello. It's also the home of over 10,000 U.S. military, and the biggest base in the entire Middle East is in Qatar. So where other would you want to have all of these nefarious terrorist organizations hanging out, where we have constant surveillance of everything? I don't know, maybe Qatar. So I there's so much of this I think most people miss in their rabid, all Muslims are bad scenarios. And I also don't think that we're going to find out that the operations, I don't see the operations in Latin America focused mainly on China. I think they're focused mainly on freeing those countries from the burden of the CIA imposed drug apparatus. Those countries, the people in those countries do not want to be a haven for drugs. They don't want to have 20,000 extra paramilitaries hanging around in Colombia killing each other. We trained over 20,000 paramilitary in Colombia. They walk around with guns guarding coca fields. We trained them. Our military trained them. They're used. Look at any death report out of Ukraine. Do you know who the private military contractors hire more than any other country as subcontractors? Colombia, because we trained them all. And you look at any death list coming out of Ukraine, there's going to be a 2-for-1 of any other country killed to Colombia.
Interesting.
So I think that all of these countries want this garbage apparatus that the CIA imposed on them out of their country. And I think that's what Trump is doing. I think he's freeing these countries. I also think that in many ways, Maduro behind the scenes is actually working with Trump. I know there's a whole lot of this, mano a mano kind of bullying going on. But if you look at what's actually going on in Venezuela, it's nothing like what people think. So I don't see that a lot of I just think it's given the sovereignty back to the countries.
I don't disagree with that. I do see the China element, though. I know they throw the word Russia around a lot. I don't really see that massively within Central and South America. I see more China. We know that China has funded a lot of the cartels throughout Mexico and Central America. We know that the BRI had expanded all throughout Peru and Ecuador and in Colombia and Brazil. So we know that they've had a presence there. One of the first things that Donald Trump did is take the Panama Canal directly back from China. So I think that they have a big financial influence in a lot of stuff that's going on. But as well, China has a deep state just as well, and a much bigger one. And things that we've been covering the last few weeks is that we had actually intelligence. One of my friends is an intelligence officer stationed over in Southeast Asia. And actually, active intelligence they have is Xi Jinping was actually removed or in the process of being removed by the PLA from power, and they were eradicating a lot of Xi Jinping loyalists from the PLA. And we've seen this kind of play out in various different OSINT channels on X recently, saying that he suffered a stroke, he didn't suffer a stroke, and he's being replaced here, and other generals are coming in with loyalties, the second premier. Now Trump's meeting with him, I think tomorrow or the next day. But there is absolutely a deep state in China. It's massive, much larger than I think that we have here because we've weeded a lot of that out. But whatever it is that it is financing terror around the world. It's financing a lot of the fentanyl into these countries. It's financing the cartels. It's an extension of the same apparatus that's working through our CIA.
See, and I just in the research that I've done, I see the fentanyl thing completely different. If you look at how the heroin was made back in the day and how the cocaine was originally made, all of the chemicals to make all of that came from U.S. chemicals. DuPont, Dow Chemical, they were supplying all of the chemicals. There was a law passed that they are not allowed to do that anymore. And so in the fentanyl case, there's legal fentanyl for medical purposes, which is manufactured in China. The fentanyl that's coming into America is not manufactured in China. China does not sell manufactured fentanyl to nefarious parties. A lot of it is the chemicals for the fentanyl is being bought through China and brought into Mexico through Guadalajara. And there is a massive amount of fentanyl labs in Mexico where the fentanyl is being manufactured throughout Latin America and trafficked into the United States. I have not seen any evidence that actual produced fentanyl for medical purposes is coming nefariously out of China into America and a black market. It is being, the chemicals is being produced or being purchased from China by legitimate companies that are doing illegitimate things with the chemicals in the manufacturing of fentanyl. So the research that I have found is the major fentanyl labs are located throughout Latin America, and they're manufactured there as well as here, as well as in Canada. But what they're buying from China is the chemicals. And here's another thing that I found out that's a pattern. When the oligarchs in the West get cut off either by their legislatures or whatever, like the chemical companies were here, what they do is they go to places like China and they go into partnerships like Apple did to manufacture over there. So my question, and I've not been able to find a smoking gun here, but if it fit a pattern, it would be the Dow and DuPont going over in joint ventures with China, manufacturing the chemicals that they know is going to end up in fentanyl and selling large quantities of them to countries that would have no reason for that chemical whatsoever other than to make fentanyl, and getting around Congress's law for them not to sell directly to, because that's exactly what happened in the cocaine. When Congress passed the law, I think it was in the early 90s, it may have been the late 80s, that cut off all the chemical companies from supplying the chemicals directly to Colombia to make their cocaine. They just set up shop over in China.
Right.
And continued selling the chemicals to Colombia. Now, I know that for sure on the cocaine part.
Cocaine side, right.
But if it fit the pattern, it would make sense that they were doing it on the fentanyl part as well.
Right. Man, it's a mess, isn't it?
It is.
What this international cartel or criminal organization syndicate has implemented over the last 100 years in infrastructure throughout the world.
Yes.
And that's one of the problems. And this is what I was saying last week. I said, each country has its deep state. It has its own deep state. And that now you spread that out between institutions and NGOs and private companies. And you start to see how wide and vast it really is. And you start to understand how very difficult it is to uproot it. Because once you take out this organization or this line of money over here, another one pops up.
So have you heard of the Green Gang in China?
No.
So there's actually, and I just stumbled across this in my research of these crazy entities. There's entire areas of China that they don't actually control. That is controlled by basically what we would refer to as a cartel. These gangs. There's an entire area like in south, a western part of China that borders a couple of other countries that it's like no man's land. There's a billionaire that runs it and no one's allowed in. And it's in China. But I did want to, since we've talked about China, I did want to mention a couple of things that most people don't know about. In the research of the stay behind units, I found that during, I want to say it was like in the 1970s in Tibet, there was a whole big thing going on about the Dalai Lama, and the CIA had went into Tibet and basically decided when they realized that the whole Chiang Kai-shek Taiwan thing wasn't working for them, that they were going to infiltrate China through Tibet. And they recruited Tibetans, flew them out of Tibet into Colorado, drove them up on a mountain because Tibet's very mountainous, and to get similar training environments, flew them into Colorado Springs, drove them up to the mountains to an abandoned World War II base, and trained them to be stay-behinds. They brought them back. And the only way we know this is because they used like the Bluebird buses, the military, that had blacked out windows, and they would do it in the dead of night. One of the aircraft had a problem and it got light, and there's all of these Tibetans running around the airport. And so it got outed that they were doing it, and it was all CIA. And so they would fly the Tibetans back into Tibet, and then they would have them attack the Chinese inside of China. They also did it with the Uyghurs in Nepal. So they would bring Uyghurs, the Muslims, into Nepal, into terrorist training camps, and train them to be stay-behind units in that XINPAING or X, I don't know how you say it in Chinese, that entire province that's over on the western side next to Nepal. And they would infiltrate these stay-behind units into China. Now, you go back to what you were saying about China never forgets. We've been at China for a very long time, attacking them inside of China. And most Americans don't even know the CIA's done any of this.
Well, and now China's looking for retribution because they're here. And they've infiltrated our government. They've infiltrated local governments and communities. I mean, we had estimates during the Joe Biden administration that, minimum 100,000 Chinese
they are doing
immigrants
to us what we did to them.
Agreed, 100%. And I think that this is part of what Trump is trying to stop.
I agree.
Because if you go to the China's 100-year plan, it calls for the annihilation of Americans, basically the control of all of our land. And, like Patrick Byrne was saying, it's Chinese generals and politicians, they own deeds to your house that they've made up and that they hold, and they can't wait till they can get over there and get their house that you're maintaining for them right now. This is part of China's plan. And so, unfortunately, I think that I don't think it's going to matter what happens. I think we're only in temporary negotiations right now in the context of the trade war. This is ultimately going to lead to some type of kinetic warfare, and most likely it's going to start with Taiwan. But if China was smart, and from a military perspective, if you were going to take Taiwan, one of the things that you would do, knowing that the United States is going to retaliate, is you would want to create a multi-fronted battle through proxy to distract the United States, take up their resources so that you could go in easily and take Taiwan with the least amount of resistance.
Their own stay-behinds?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and then Ukraine, Russia. I mean, how's Russia getting funded for this war? China. A lot of that funding is coming directly from China. Then you got the EU. The EU is funding Ukraine. Well, the interesting thing is what is the interdependency on China and the European Union, or UK for that matter, in the context of supply chain? It's massive. They are massively interdependent upon Chinese money flowing into Europe. So you have China on both sides of the Ukraine-Russia conflict that are fueling that. Well, what is that Ukraine-Russia conflict doing? Well, it's taking up resources, military resources of the two major superpowers that are contenders to China.
So again, you've seen that meme where it says, my taxes are funding this, and somehow my taxes are also funding this.
Right.
That's China now.
Well, it was like, wasn't that the Hamas missiles coming in and the
Iron
Dome?
They didn't have a name. It was just two people fighting, and it was like, somehow, my taxes are funding these missiles, and somehow my taxes are also funding these missiles. And that has been the way of warfare, because we funded the Iranian side and the Iraqi side of the Iran-Iraq war. We were selling missiles to Iran while they're at war, and we were actually funding Iraq. Mm-hmm. So somehow the Reagan administration twice sold large supplies of missiles using Israel as a cutout to Iran during the Iran-Iraq war. It was part of the Iran-Contra. And at the same time, we were overtly funding Iraq. So somehow we're funding this side and somehow we're funding this side too. The same thing happened in the World War II and the Bolshevik Revolution. Somehow we're funding this side and this side. So that has been warfare for the United States for a very long time. Covertly funding one side while overtly funding another. And China is basically following in our footsteps, and we hate it.
Yep. And, you know, you go back to the 60s and you look at the money that flew in for China's Industrial Revolution that funded Mao, and it's Western money, massive amounts. I mean, Henry Kissinger loved China, loved Mao. You have Soros. Yep. You have Soros, who funded a lot of the money in there. You have a massive American philanthropist that funded money into China. Then you go into the Barack Obama.
Israel was feeding them our secrets.
Well, and then when Obama came in, Israel didn't have to, because Obama and his administration did it for them. And they did it nicely and neatly with various different SAP programs through private email servers contained in politicians' homes that through metadata were just sending SAP program information to China, to a Gmail address that China had access to and would log in with an IP address. And then they would find out through the SAP program which universities and which professors were getting this special access program grant through the National Science Foundation or through the DOD or the DOE. Then they would go take that scientist over that university, fund that university, throw them some money, take that scientist, bring them over to the Wuhan Institute of Technology, and extrapolate all that data. That's how China increased their military advancement in 10 years, was stealing U.S. military secrets through that program because of Barack Obama, because of the 10,000 Talents program, educational exchange programs that Obama started through executive order in his first term. Trump shut it down with the China Initiative.
We had an entire war to steal all the German engineers.
True. I'm not going to disagree with that. Well, and those German engineers became Americans.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, that's just how it goes. And it's a crazy world, and it's going to be an interesting war, because I definitely think that there's no getting out of this. There's just right now, Russia doesn't seem to be, I mean, I know there's a lot of rhetoric going out there about Russia and the United States. I'm not worried one bit about Russia. Russia is not a concern to me whatsoever. Russia cannot stand on its own. If China and Russia allied against the world, it's going to be mutually assured destruction. So it's just not a possibility. A lot of the plan.
I don't think Russia is an enemy of the United States.
I don't either. I think that they're very much an ally, but a covert ally. Yes. And I think that what they're doing is they are walking a very thin line with their alliance with China. And this is why we still have this rhetoric going on between Trump and Putin. But I think that a lot of what's going on right now is there's only two countries in this world that matter. And I hate to say it like this, and that's the United States and China. Because at some point in time, right now, we're in a technological Cold War. It's all about ASI, who can develop artificial superintelligence first. And the key to artificial superintelligence comes about with the control of resources, rare earth minerals and metals, and energy. The three components to artificial superintelligence or artificial intelligence is computation, data, and energy. Energy being the primary. And so whoever controls energy and who can build the infrastructure the fastest is going to be the one who obtains ASI and is going to lead the world into tomorrow. If China gets there before us, we're done. And so I think this is what's on Trump's mind right now, and that every move that he is doing is based upon that idea.
I don't disagree.
Awesome. Guys, go visit Colonel Towner. x.com/Colonel Towner, COLONELTOWNER. Go visit her. She's also got a Rumble page you can find linked up on her X page. Colonel Towner, it's awesome having you on. I'm gonna have you on again. We got a lot of conversations. I can actually go back into the whole historical context of pre-Gladio that you were talking about when you're talking about Mazzani and Albert Pike. We go into the infiltration of all of the secret societies and the dark occult. This stuff's been going on a lot longer, and there's many more topplings of governments that happened before this one.
Yeah. So Warhamster Brady, who's a good friend of Ghost of Base Patrick Henry and I's, started a series, gosh, probably 8 months ago, delving into secret societies. And we started off with Skull and Bones. And of course, that started off in the early 1800s. And we methodically went through every class of Skull and Bones and the role that they played in this international syndicate. The families, because a lot of it was generational, the Delanos, the Roosevelts, and all of those, the Whitneys, a lot of families that you've never even heard of, the Lords, they play major roles behind the scenes. And we're in the middle of Skull and Key. I think we're towards the end of it. We're going to go through the Pilgrim Society, which is the bridge between the US and the UK. Because as far as I'm concerned, all roads lead to London when it comes to the destabilization and the one world government, the Fabian Society, all of that type of thing, the creation of Israel. And so I would like to close with just this as a thought for people, kind of a thought-provoking. Part of the strategy of tension at the end of, the end of World War I, because as you mentioned earlier about the 3 world wars, that was something that was the Fabians also said, that there was going to be 3 world wars. Part of the aftermath of World War II, there was purposely set up countries. I mentioned Taiwan, but we also know Israel was set up after World War II. And just as you just mentioned with China, they were geographically specifically set up as a part of strategy of tension. Israel set up to control the Middle East, and Taiwan was set up to control Asia. And by setting those countries up in those geographically specific areas, they were able to destabilize at a moment's notice. All there has to be is some perceived threat, and you've got instant war. And that's how they control the world. You can basically produce an all-out war by having a couple of nodes that you can activate at any time in your strategy of tension. And I think that's very, very important for people to understand. Pakistan's another one. Pakistan was made up out of whole cloth after World War II. There was no such thing as Pakistan before that. And what happened with Pakistan? It's a launching pad for India, Afghanistan, all of those areas. It was purposely set up as part of an orchestrated event to be able to control entire regions of the world.
Interesting. Ordo ab chaos, right? Order out of chaos. That is the motto. Is you produce the chaos and you control the
new world order.
That's right. Ordo ab chaos. So, Colonel Towner, I appreciate you coming on with me so much. I'm going to have to, I'll hit you up. We're going to definitely have you back on. I want to do, I mean, we did, man, almost an hour and 45 minutes. We could do a lot more. And so, looking forward to it. I appreciate you come on. Thank you so much for being here.
The invite. Appreciate it.
Take care, Colonel.
Take care.
All right, guys, there you have it, Colonel Towner and Operation Gladio. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. You can visit Colonel Towner right there, x.com, Colonel Towner, COLONELTOWNER, and go give her a follow. And man, what a crazy world we live in. That is one thing for sure. So we're going to get out here in a few minutes. I'm going to play a song for you, but I've just got to pay the bills real quick with this advertisement from crypto.com. Let's be clear. Cryptocurrency is no longer emerging. It's here. And its latest move cements that reality in the biggest way yet. Trump Media Group just inked a massive $6.4 billion deal with Crypto.com, the world's top crypto platform. They're teaming up to scoop up $6.4 billion in CRO, the powerhouse token that fuels fast, low-fee DeFi, staking rewards, and real-world perks like cashback on your spends to launch America's first CRO treasury. When it's done, this new company will be the biggest CRO holder out there. Want in on the action? Head to crypto.com today and grab some CRO. Let's make crypto great again. All right. And we did play a new song for you at the beginning of the show. I hope you did enjoy that. You can always find those at redpillsmusic.com, redpillsmusic.com. And don't forget, we had Tammy on earlier today. And if you're interested in that, redpillcellreset.com, redpillcellreset.com. And those links are linked up in the description box below. So I hope you guys have a great night. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Q-versary, the first Q post, 8-year anniversary of the first Q post ever. So I hope you join me tomorrow night, and then DEFCON 0 after that. Much love, respect. God bless. Take care. Have a great night. See you next time.
There was a time when our children stood tall, hand on their hearts, one voice for all. There was a time when honor had weight, when the flag was a symbol, not a debate. There was a time when our history was known, with pride in the rules that made us our own. There was a time, respect for the brave, for those who bled, for the lives they gave. Now the homeland burns in silent war. Truth is twisted, we can't ignore. Voice still calls, we the people will not fall. There was a time, but the time isn't near. The great awakening is here. Dark to light, veil under, patriots rise. We are one, land of the free, home of the brave. Children of freedom, stand for the light. There was a time when truth was clear, when the media served, not ruled by fear. There was a time when leaders stood fast, guarding the people, defending the past. Now corruption wears a crown, lies are fed to tear us down. But Q said watch, and Q said see. The silent war will set us free. From the front lines, soldiers stare, wondering if we're still there. Their blood, their hope, their sacrifice will not be sold for a last prize. There was a time, but the time isn't near. The great awakening is here. Dark to light, the veil undone, patriots rise. We are one. Children of freedom, stand for the light.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on. Or we will spend our sunset years telling our children what it was once like in the United States where men were free.
There was a time, the time is near. The great awakening is here.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. The air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation. I want you to get mad.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
The more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
These people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy.
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"